This is now Africa 24. Africa is entering an unfamiliar dawn. A continent long restrained by outside hands is now stepping into its own reflection, unbroken, unsoftened, and unafraid.
For a very long time, Africa's path forward was written in offices far from its own shores. Decisions affecting millions were drafted in foreign capitals, approved in boardrooms on the other side of the world, and implemented by individuals who saw the continent not as a partner, but as a vault, one filled with resources, potential, and influence they sought to control. Africa's destiny was shaped without Africa's voice. But something is shifting, quietly, steadily, like a storm forming far beyond the horizon long before the sky grows dark. A deep, tectonic movement has begun, the kind that does not reveal itself with noise at first, but with pressure, with intention, with resolve. That storm is Africa's awakening. And the first tremor begins with a message carried across borders, across languages, across generations, and across every fault line that once divided the continent. Africa will no longer bow to those who stole its future. From this moment on, the continent rises, not as broken pieces, but as a unified force reclaiming its destiny. Across the map, something unusual is forming. It is not a political campaign crafted for votes. It is not a government program wrapped in slogans. It is not a movement fueled by foreign sponsorship. It is a pulse, strong, steady, and growing. You can feel it on the streets of Bamako as young people speak of a new future. You hear it whispered in the crowded markets of Tripoli. It surfaces in debates inside university classrooms in Accra. It echoes through community halls in Nairobi. And online, a new generation amplifies it, fearless, outspoken, and determined not to inherit weakness. At the center of this continental shift stand two symbolic figures, Saif al-Islam Gaddafi of Libya and Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso. Two men from different countries. Two histories that never intersected. Two legacies shaped by different eras. Yet both now point toward the same horizon, an Africa that is strong, sovereign, respected, and unshakable. Gaddafi represents a legacy the world tried to bury, one built on Pan-African ideas, oil-driven economic power, and the memory of an ambition that once sought unity across the continent. Traoré represents the rise of a new generation, disciplined, unapologetic, and unwilling to bow to foreign influence. One symbolizes continuity, the other, revolution. Together, they form a possibility the world did not predict, a merging of wealth and willpower capable of altering global equations. And millions of young Africans feel this shift running through their veins. This awakening is driven not by imported hope, but by local confidence, something the architects of the old order hoped Africa would never rediscover. For decades, the Sahel was described as fragile, a corridor of instability stretching through Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and Guinea. The narrative painted these nations as perpetual dependents, reliant on foreign armies, foreign policies, and foreign aid. But under Captain Ibrahim Traoré, that framing has begun to dissolve. Burkina Faso reclaimed its gold mines. It expelled foreign troops. It announced without hesitation that the country belongs to its people, not to foreign corporations, not to outside governments, and not to anyone who profits from extraction disguised as assistance. Soon, Mali followed. Then Niger, then Guinea. Old agreements were publicly torn up. Foreign military bases were ordered to leave. Decades-old mining deals, ones that extracted billions while paying crumbs, were rejected or renegotiated. For the first time in many years, the nations of the Sahel stood shoulder to shoulder, not isolated or competing, but aligned through shared purpose. The Sahel transformed from a region portrayed as vulnerable into a backbone of continental defiance, a symbol of unity, a declaration of strength. And across Africa, millions now look toward these nations with admiration. But as powerful as the Sahel movement is, it lacks one crucial component: an economic engine capable of fueling the next phase of Africa's transformation. That is where Libya enters the equation. If Libya aligns itself with this rising Sahel bloc, the continent's geopolitical landscape changes instantly. Libya holds Africa's largest oil reserves. It has strategic ports facing Europe. It contains natural gas deposits, sovereign wealth, and a geographic position that links the Mediterranean to the heart of the continent. Combine Libya's economic force with the Sahel's military unity and ideological momentum, and a new equation forms, one the world has not witnessed in half a century. Western capitals know exactly what this combination means, and they fear it, because unity strengthens Africa, and division keeps Africa dependent. Today, for the first time in decades, African nations are not negotiating from weakness. They are negotiating with clarity, resolve, and confidence. This is the heartbeat of a new Pan-African movement, one rooted not in speeches or symbolism, but in measurable action. The Sahel brings discipline and security. Libya brings resources and economic leverage. Together, they unlock possibilities once dismissed as impossible. Across African universities, social media platforms, and community discussions, people are asking a question that was once taboo. What would happen if Africa truly united? A question that once sounded like fiction now feels like an emerging reality. For years, Africa's wealth, gold, uranium, bauxite, cobalt, lithium, copper, oil, was pulled from the ground and shipped overseas, while African nations remained dependent on the very countries that profited from their resources. Foreign military presence ensured this structure remained untouched. Aid programs maintained the illusion of support while enabling resource extraction. But that structure is cracking. Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and Guinea have reclaimed their mines. They have retaken control of their military strategies. They are directing their own trade relationships. And they are building alliances not based on foreign approval, but mutual African interests. Now imagine Libya joining this momentum. If Libya channels its oil through African networks, if Sahel minerals flow through Libyan ports, if an internal African market forms where African wealth circulates inside Africa, then a global shift is triggered. Not gradually, not symbolically, but immediately. It would be an economic earthquake felt far beyond Africa's borders. For the first time in modern history, Africa would control the value of its own soil. It could build industries rather than exporting raw materials. It could create millions of jobs instead of exporting opportunity. It could become powerful, not because it seeks permission, but because it demands fairness. The West sees this as a threat. Africans see it as liberation. Across villages, towns, major cities, and digital communities, one message is repeated more boldly every day. We do not need aid. We need ownership. We do not need outsiders. We need autonomy. We do not need supervision. We need sovereignty. We do not need permission. We need control of our destiny. This is the real revolution, not simply political or military, but psychological, a transformation of mindset, a continent rediscovering its confidence after generations of pressure designed to erase it. Saif al-Islam Gaddafi stands as a bridge to a past where unity was imagined. Ibrahim Traoré represents the present where unity is pursued. Together they point toward a future where unity becomes reality. History may one day write this era as the moment Africa opened its eyes fully and refused to close them again. Countries once dependent on foreign security now build their own alliances. Nations once divided by design now align through conviction. The shadows of colonial influence grow thinner, replaced by a rising African order built on dignity, self-respect, and collective strength. This order is not constructed through slogans. It is crafted through decisions, bold, unapologetic, and rooted in national pride. It is built on the belief that African resources must serve African people. African armies must protect African borders. African decisions must be made by African leaders. If Libya stabilizes under nationalist leadership, if the Sahel alliance strengthens, if more nations join this continental awakening, then Africa will reshape global economics, global politics, and global power structures in ways that were unimaginable even a decade ago. Imagine a trade network that keeps African wealth inside Africa, a unified defense force free of foreign occupation, a continental voice powerful enough to demand fairness on the world stage, a generation that views unity not as a dream, but as its inheritance. This is not distant. It is unfolding right now. The world is watching, confused and concerned. Analysts call it unpredictable. Governments call it dangerous. But Africans call it something else: awakening. For the first time in generations, the continent is writing its own chapter, a chapter defined by sovereignty, courage, and an unshakable refusal to be controlled. The foundation is set, the direction is chosen, and the momentum is unstoppable. Because at the center of everything lies a truth the world can no longer ignore. Whoever controls Africa's resources controls Africa's future. And for the first time in modern history, that control is returning to African hands, piece by piece, decision by decision, alliance by alliance. A new African order is rising. And this time, Africa is the author, the narrator, and the architect of its own story.